Hello friends, in the previous lecture we saw why it is important for us to consider the thermodynamics of solution. So far what we have been considering is we have been largely looking into the unary system, a material rather, which is typified by the presence of a single form of components. So we considered the generalized concept of thermodynamics, the different concepts, different laws, we considered it, and we attempted to rather introduce or employ these understanding to understand the behavior of a specific form of a system. And this system in our previous lectures was unary system or unary material, which is characterized by the presence of a single form of component, and this component could be, as we discussed, atoms, molecules or ions. And in the previous lecture we saw that it is not necessary for us to have, or it is not necessary that even in the framework of the unary system that the physical states should correspond to the phase that we observe in a material. So physical states, it is we will be able to realize it, we will be able to identify it or describe it by considering the system macroscopically. So a physical state of the system could be solid, liquid and gas. And this of course could be treated as a phase of the system, of a given system, particularly when the system is a unary one. However, there are certain unary systems, there are certain unary materials wherein when you zoom in, when you consider the atomistic scale or even in the microscopic scale, it is possible, or at a given temperature, the way these individual single components, these homogeneous components are arranged within the material vary. So you have a same material made up of the same components and they are homogeneously distributed. There is no disturbance in how they are being distributed, but depending on the condition, particularly when the condition is pressure and temperature or both combined, depending on the condition that particular system is present, the way these components that constitute the unary material vary, thereby even within the solid state we have different phases. So it is not always possible for us to treat the physical state synonymous to that of the phases that we observe in a unary system or a unary material. In addition to that, in previous lecture we saw that when we consider the binary system, that is a system where in addition to a given component you have another component. So often when you talk about a binary system, you have a component that usually occupies the major portion of the material and the other component that occupies relatively smaller portion of the material. So depending on that, we can refer to it as the solvent and solute. And these terminologies are often associated with solution. And in the previous lecture we saw why should we have to consider the thermodynamics of solution, because even while treating a given binary material or a binary system, say alloy, in its solid states, it is possible for us to treat it as a solution. It is possible for us to rather describe it as a solution because from a macroscopic point of view, the way the components are arranged are rather homogeneous. The way we perceive this binary material is rather homogeneous, like a salt solution wherein you will not be able to distinguish salt from that of water when viewing macroscopically. The same holds true for a binary solid solution. The solute atom, the alloying element, so these are certain terminologies that we need to be familiar with, considering that we are attempting to be a metallurgical engineer or material scientist. What we have is, we have a solute or an alloying element that has completely infused itself, that has completely rather merged itself with the unary system, thereby creating a binary system. Like a salt, a solute that rather mixes up or completely dissolves itself to form a solution. In the same way, the alloying element completely dissolves itself, either occupying a position that is supposed to be occupied by the actual solvent component or solvent atom, either by doing so, either by substituting the component of the solvent atom, the solute gets dissolved in the solid solution, or by occupying the positions between the actual solvent components, the solid solutions of binary system is formed. So therefore, the solution term is, at least in the context of the metallurgical engineering or in the context of the thermodynamics of material, the solution is not exclusively restricted to the liquid solution. It can be because of this similarity between how we can view the alloys as a complete dissolution of the alloying element and the solvent. The solution is extended, that the treatment of solution is extended in the framework of thermodynamics, and therefore this binary material that comprises of a completely dissolved solute, a completely dissolved alloying element in the solvent, we refer to it as the solid solution. And that is the reason why we would like to ponder more on the thermodynamics of solution. Now, in order to do so, again, in order to understand the thermodynamics of solution, in order to navigate through gaining some concepts of the solution, thermodynamically approach the solutions thermodynamically, let us begin by considering a unary solution. So, of course, we would like, or the main goal for us, to have or to treat the binary materials in the form of solution, but in order to understand certain concepts, in order to build on or in order to establish a good foundation, let us begin by considering a unary solution. The unary solution, as the name indicates, of course, let us assume it to be a liquid, and unary meaning it is made up of a single component. Now, this unary solution, let us introduce it in a vacuum. So you have a beaker or you have a box which is in vacuum. So there is no pressure in it. So there is it's a complete vacuum box. And in this vacuum box, you are introducing this unary solution. And you are not completely filling this vacuum box with the unary solution, but you are partially filling this vacuum box with the unary solution. Now this is the one in the blue, it indicates the unary solution. So unary solution. Now, nature, it abhors vacuum, meaning the nature doesn't want vacuum to be present in its a vacuum is not a stable energy configuration. The vacuum is not a stable state when left in the nature. So whenever it is possible, the system or the nature itself, like to put it generically, nature it doesn't want vacuum to be present in this particular system. So therefore, what happens is some of this unary liquid, what happens is this components of the unary liquid gets detached from the solution, get detached from its liquid form, and they form vapor. They change or transform into vapor that occupy the previously vacuum region of the system. So what essentially you have is, you have a vacuum, and in that vacuum you are pouring some unary solution. Of course, unary solution is rather misnomer, meaning you can have solution only if there are two components, but go with me here. So you have a unary solution, and in that unary solution, by solution what we mean is it's in the form of a liquid. So let us assume that understanding. So when we have a unary solution, we are placing it in a vacuum, and because the unary solution is not completely filled, there is some vacuum left. Some of the components of the unary solution get detached from its liquid state and transform into a vapor in order to ensure that there is no vacuum left in the system. So vacuum is not a stable energy configuration. You have to introduce energy, you have to spend some energy in order to establish a vacuum. When left to itself, the vacuum will get replaced by any components that easily occupies, that replaces the vacuum. So that being the case, since vacuum is not a stable energy configuration, once you place or once you fill in this vacuum with the unary solution, what you end up having is some of the components leaving the unary solution and occupying the vacuum in the form of vapor state. So what you essentially have is, you have the unary solution in the form of liquid plus in the form of vapor. So even though you initially introduce liquid, you have the combination of liquid and vapor. Now, even though initially there is a significant amount of transition of this unary solution to vapor, after some moment, after some time, after a prolongation of this transition, after a prolonged transition of this liquid to vapor, eventually there established, so an equilibrium will be established between this liquid and the vapor state. So initially you pour in this unary solution, because of the presence of the vacuum, a transition is introduced, meaning some portion of the components leave the liquid state and form the vapor state, and this will not continue forever. So there are several variables that governs this. So eventually, gradually, what happens is, as the time proceeds, there will be an equilibrium, a stability established between the liquid and the vapor. Now, this stability is established when the pressure of the vapor is of specific value. So, when the criteria that dictates when this stability is reached is when a specific vapor pressure is reached. So, this vapor pressure is called as the saturated vapor pressure. Saturated vapor pressure. So, what we essentially have is, once the transition is initiated, that is the transition from the liquid to vapor is initiated within a vacuum, this transition ends. This transition terminates when the vapor pressure that builds up in the vacuum is equal to the specific value, and that specific value is called the saturated vapor pressure. So, if we are considering a unary solution that comprises of a component A, the saturated vapor pressure is dependent on the component, and therefore it is represented in this manner. So, as the saturation or the stability between the liquid and the vapor depends on the nature of the liquid, and it varies with the liquid. So, therefore, this saturated vapor pressure is rather typified or qualified by indicating which kind of material or what type of component we are dealing with. So, essentially, what we have so far considered is, we have considered a vacuum, we have introduced a liquid, and that liquid, because of still the vacuum is present, gets converted into vapor, so that no vacuum is left. Now, this conversion needs to reach, so this conversion is a dynamic process, this conversion needs to reach an stability at equilibrium. This is reached when the vapor pressure that is built up by the atoms that are moving away from the liquid attains a specific value, and this vapor pressure is called as saturated vapor pressure. Now, let us consider the equilibrium that is established between the liquid and the vapor here. So, this is one way of considering this would be, so what has happened is, some portion of the liquid has been transformed to vapor, and there is an interface between, so let us consider the interface between the liquid here, and the same components are present in the vapor form here. So, it is possible for us to have a condition like this, wherein you have the same components present in the vapor form in the surrounding region, and the same component present in the liquid form below. So, in the above you have the same component A in the vapor form, here you have the same component A in the liquid form. So A remains A in the vapor state, and the liquid remains as it is without any change. So, so once the equilibrium is established, so A can stay as it is and B can stay as it is, so that would establish a static equilibrium. However, it is also possible that since in the vacuum, or since in the vacuum that was earlier present, so in this given region, there is the possibility of the atoms to move, and there is this possibility of the atoms colliding with each other, and also the atoms colliding with the liquid below. Not only the atoms are able to, or the components are have the possibility of colliding with each other, there is also the possibility of the atoms colliding with or interacting with the liquid below. So, because of this interaction, because of this possibility, because of this degree of freedom for the components to move around, to interact with each other, and also to interact with the liquid below, what essentially we have is, we have some components joining the liquid and some other component transforming to a vapor state or changing to vapor state in order to ensure that the saturated vapor pressure is maintained. So, there are two possibilities. Once the stability is established, once the equilibrium is established, the gaseous state, the vapor state of the A atom can stay as it is, the liquid state of the A solution can stay as it is. That is one possibility that we refer to as the static equilibrium. The other possibility is because of this interaction, because of this ability of these atoms to move around in this free space, to interact with each other and also to interact with the solution, we have some of the atoms or some of the components changing back to liquid, and in order to ensure that the saturated vapor pressure is maintained, in order to ensure that the stability is maintained, some of the atoms which were in liquid state getting converted into vapor. So this happens while both these phases are in equilibrium, and this is referred, or this phenomena is referred to as, or this rather behavior of the system to ensure the stability between the two phases. You have two phases and the stability between them is ensured by continuous changing of, so you have, when you have one component changing its phase, you have another component reversing or changing its phase as well in a reversed manner so as to ensure the equilibrium, and this is what we refer to as the dynamic stability, equilibrium or dynamic stability. What we have is, we have two states, stability states that are possible: a static stability, where the two components, two phases stay as it is without any interaction. In case of dynamic equilibrium, what we have is, we have a strong interaction between the two phases. When components of one phase get absorbed by the component or by the other phase, the same amount of component is being lost by this phase that has already observed, in order to ensure that the equilibrium is established, and that is what we refer to as the dynamic equilibrium. Now, in case of dynamic equilibrium, it is observed in this context. We observe this in this context, and again, it is rather introduced by, or it is rather ensured by the vapor pressure, the saturated vapor pressure. So, one takeaway point is that whenever we talk about equilibrium, it doesn't always need to be static equilibrium. The possibility is also there for the dynamic equilibrium, wherein the stability is ensured, wherein the equilibrium is ensured by the complementing transition of the states or complementary transition between the phases, but and while this transition is occurring, the criteria that decides the equilibrium is maintained. So there is a transition, but it is within, or it is while ensuring this criteria is not disturbed. So whatever vapor pressure is there, it is equal to the saturated vapor pressure. Now let us move away from this understanding of, so now we have gained an understanding of what saturated vapor pressure is and what a dynamic equilibrium means. Now let us move away from this understanding, or let us build on this understanding by moving away towards the solution that we are interested in. The solution wherein its meaning is not just liquid, but it comprises of one additional component. So let us consider the same, or let us treat the binary solution in the same manner how we have approached the unary solution. So the binary solution, as the name indicates, is comprised of, let us assume that it comprises of two components, A and B. Now let us extend the same technique, or let us apply the same approach that we have adopted for the unary solution. So what essentially we are doing is, we are now pouring this unary solution in a system, in a box, in a system rather, which is held at, or which is in vacuum, or which this system is a vacuum box. So here what we have is, we have a binary solution. Now instead of unary solution, we are introducing a binary solution. Now this binary solution, it comprises of, so just to make the distinction, we have unary solution in blue and we have the binary solution in green. So this binary solution comprises of A and B. So it is no longer just A that is present, it is the combination of A and B. Now, despite the change in the nature of the solution, the way the system would behave, the way the solution as it is would behave is going to remain the same, meaning nature abhors vacuum, it hates vacuum. Vacuum is not a low energy configuration in the nature. So therefore what happens is, similar to that of the unary solution, the binary solution reacts to vacuum, and you have some of these components that constitute the AB solution will transform to the vapor phase and occupy the empty space. So the empty space that was initially vacuum now is being occupied by the components both A and B. So a binary solution comprises of components A and B, and you are pouring that solution, it's completely dissolved solution, you are pouring it into a vacuum, and since it is not completely filled, there are some free space that is left. Both these components, they leave the solution. Some components, not all, some of the components A and B, they leave the solution and occupy the vacuum region. Now what we have is this process, again this transition of both AB components in the solution from the liquid to, or from the solution to the vapor phase, it gets terminated when the saturated vapor pressure is achieved. Now initially this saturated vapor pressure in case of the unary solution, what essentially we saw is that in case of unary solution, this saturated vapor pressure was largely dependent on just A, or it is exclusively dependent on A alone, because A is the only component present. Now in case of the binary solution, you have both A and B are present. So the criteria that dictates the stability for the binary system is now extended. So initially it was just the saturated vapor pressure of A, but now it needs to include the role of B as well, since we have two different components. So it needs to be, the saturated vapor pressure should include both the vapor pressure of A and vapor pressure of B. Now if you compare the unary solution to that of the binary solution, what we essentially have is that we have the inclusion of an additional component. In case of unary, you have only one component. In case of binary, you have an inclusion of another component. One way of looking at this is, in case of binary solution, the amount of the component A is reduced in order to accommodate the component B. So one way of relating unary to binary solution is the amount. In case of unary, it is completely comprised of component A. In case of binary, what we have is the amount of A is reduced in order to accommodate the newly included component B. Now, despite these differences, it is possible for us to understand the kinetics of this transition from the vapor state, or from the liquid state to vapor state back to the liquid state. The kinetics of this transition, despite the difference in the solution, be it unary or binary, the kinetics remains the same. The way, or the factors that govern this transition from liquid to vapor and vapor to liquid. So to put it or to use appropriate terminologies, we have in dynamic equilibrium, we have condensation and evaporation. So dynamic solution or dynamic equilibrium, it encompasses both evaporation and condensation. So irrespective of the unary, what is the nature of a solution, unary or binary, once a dynamic equilibrium is established, the factors that govern, the trend that governs, or the parameters that govern the evaporation, the nature of the expression that dictates the evaporation and condensation is identical. I'm not saying all the factors that are involved in binary will be involved in unary, but when you consider the form of the expression, qualitatively both these are governed by the same principle. So let us consider what is the principle that dictates the rate of evaporation and the rate of condensation. So the rate of evaporation, what evaporation is nothing but the breakaway of the atom from its liquid state to the vapor state. So that is what we refer to as the evaporation in this context, and in most of other contexts as well. The evaporation involves breaking away of the components in its liquid state to that of the gaseous state. Now, what essentially we have when the component is in this liquid state, we have component that is already present in its stable condition. So let us consider an illustration. So when you have a system that is already present, or rather, so when you have a system that is in a stable state, when you have a component that is in a stable state, it means it is already in its low energy configuration. So if you have a system that is in a state, it is a low energy configuration. So the atom in or the component in its liquid state is at its low energy configuration. Now when it wants to transform and move to a different state that offers a further or that is even more a low energy state, it needs to overcome a barrier. So the components of the unary solution, let us focus on the unary solution, is initially at its lower energy state. While it is being in its solution, it is in the low energy state. Now once you put it in the vacuum, once you place this solution in the vacuum, there is a possibility of this particular solution or this particular component occupying a new low energy state, and in order to do that, it has to overcome this energy barrier. And this energy barrier, only when this energy barrier is overcome, your component we will be able to occupy this new energy state here. So this new energy state, it corresponds to the vapor of the A component. So the transition from the liquid to vapor is possible only when this energy is overcome. This barrier energy is overcome by the A component. So only when the component A, which is in the liquid state, is able to overcome this barrier energy, then you will observe a transition from the liquid state to vapor state. So supposing you have n number of component A in a system. So there are n number of component A in the liquid state, and n star of it is changing to vapor. So A in liquid and a portion of it, n star of it, is changing. So it's getting transformed to vapor. What it means is that this n star of components have been or they were able to overcome this particular energy, this particular energy barrier. This amount of components, this number of atoms were able to overcome this particular barrier, and only by overcoming this barrier they were able to transform from the liquid state to the vapor state. Now the way or one way of expressing the relation or relating the number of atoms that are able to overcome this energy barrier from the total number of atoms is using a probabilistic approach. And when we do that, one way of relating the number of atoms that are able to overcome the energy barriers to the total number of atoms is something like this. This is the energy barrier, and T is the temperature, and Kb is the Boltzmann constant. So when taking this approach, we understand that these number of atoms are able to overcome the energy barrier that is required for the transition of the liquid state to solid state. So what we have is the transition is possible only when the barrier energy is when the atom is able to overcome the barrier energy, and the number of atoms that are able to overcome the barrier energy from the total number of atoms is of this expression here. What this expression indicates is when the activation, so remember that there is a negative sign here, so therefore when the activation or the barrier energy is higher, the number of atoms that is experiencing a transition will be lower. So the number of atoms that is transforming from the liquid state to that of the solid state, or rather the liquid state to that of the vapor state, is lower. On the other hand, we have temperature. Even though it is in the denominator, please note that there is an exponential relation. So therefore, as the temperature increases, the number of atoms that is experiencing the transition from the liquid to the vapor state also increases. So this is one way of rather relating the rate or the amount of transition that occurs when you have the evaporation in our system, in our vacuum system. When we have the evaporation, this is the expression that helps us understand how much of the atoms that we have is getting transformed to vapor. Now, when you consider condensation, so it's the counterpart of the one form of transition. When you consider the condensation, the rate at which this condensation is occurring So the rate at which, now we are considering the rate at which this condensation is occurring for the A. So we will follow the same convention. So for A, the rate at which this condensation is occurring depends on, it's proportional to the amount of, or the number of the components that are present in the vapor state. So only when you have the vapor state present, there is a condensation, there is the possibility of condensation exists. So only when you need to have a vapor state for the condensation to exist. The rate of this condensation, it depends on the number of components that are present in the vapor phase. So you need vapor phase for the condensation, and the rate of the condensation depends on the number of components that are present in the vapor phase. Now the number of components is rather proportional to the pressure that is associated with the vapor. So the number of components that are present in the vapor phase, it relates to the vapor pressure that we observe in this region here. So when the number of component increases, the vapor pressure increases. So therefore we saw that for condensation to occur, the system or the material needs to be present in the vapor phase, and the rate of condensation depends on the number of components, the number of atoms that are present in the vapor phase. Now the number of atoms are proportional to that of the vapor pressure. So what it essentially means is that the rate of condensation depends on the vapor pressure of the component A. Now if we consider the equilibrium, the dynamic equilibrium, wherein we have both evaporation and condensation present, the rate of condensation for A is proportional to the saturated vapor pressure of A. So let me repeat, condensation requires the material in a vapor state, and the rate of condensation is proportional to the number of the atoms that is present in the vapor state. Now the number of atoms is proportional to the vapor pressure. When the number of atoms increases, the vapor pressure increases. Now we are considering the dynamic equilibrium case. In dynamic equilibrium, the vapor pressure of the component is equal to that of the saturated vapor pressure. So therefore the rate of condensation during dynamic equilibrium is equal to that of the saturated vapor pressure. So if you place a proportionality constant that is dependent on the component, we have this expression here. So this is a proportionality constant. Now the critical point here is, under dynamic equilibrium, the rate of evaporation is equal to, or both the rate of evaporation and the rate of condensation must be equivalent. Only then the dynamic equilibrium will be established. So therefore from this expression for the rate of condensation, we will be able to also calculate the rate of evaporation. So both the rate of evaporation and the rate of condensation they are dependent on the partial pressure of the component that is present in the system. So what it essentially means is that you have a phase transition, you have a phase transformation, and during an equilibrium, so this phase transformation, the rate of this phase transformation, this transformation rate is rather at equilibrium, or rather they are equivalent to one another. So therefore by focusing on the change in state, that gives us a simplistic relation. So here we focused on the change in state that gave us the simplistic relation. We are now able to relate or quantify the rate of evaporation, one form of transition to the other, and correspondingly evaluated with relation to a saturated vapor pressure. So you have two transitions, evaporation and condensation. In dynamic equilibrium, both the rate of both needs to be equivalent in order to ensure there is a stability in the system. Now one of this transformation is rather easy to formulate. So here it is in the case of condensation. So once you are able to formulate this particular phase transition, the rate of this particular transition, then because of the established equivalency, because of the established similarity in the rate. Because of the established dynamic equilibrium, we will be able to relate the other rather seemingly complex phase transformation to this one, by formulating its rate. Now, we can extend the same understanding to that of the binary system. So far, we have exclusively considered the unary system. This unary system helped us understand that the rate of evaporation and the rate of condensation, it is dependent on the saturated vapor pressure of the component. Again, we often qualify the saturated vapor pressure of the component as A and B because depending on the components, this saturated vapor pressure would vary. Now, we saw that the primary difference between the unary and the binary solution is that the amount of the component that are present in binary solution when compared to the unary is less. For instance, in unary solution, the solution completely comprises of A. In case of binary solution, only a portion of it is A and the remaining portion of it is B. So, in order to accommodate B for a given size of the system, the number of A is reduced, the amount of A is reduced. Now, when we are considering the rate of condensation, when we were rather formulating the expression for the rate of condensation, we saw that for the unary system, the rate is dependent on the number of components that is present in the vapor phase. Now, when you compare the unary and the binary system, what then we essentially have is, we have the reduced number of A components that are present in the binary system when compared to unary system. In unary system, it's completely A. In case of binary system, a reduced number of A is present. So what we have is, we have the rate of condensation that is dependent on the number of A components, the A atoms that is present, since when compared to unary system, in B, the number of A components are relatively less, then correspondingly, we have to formulate our expression for the rate of condensation. So, the rate of condensation is dependent on the amount of atoms that is present in the vapor state. So, therefore, correspondingly, the rate of in binary solution, since the rate of condensation is dependent on the number of components present, the rate of condensation is rather normalized, it's rather considered or formulated in relation to the amount of A atoms that is present. So therefore, the expression is rather, it is a prefactor is introduced that includes the number of atoms of A that is present in the binary system, and now the rate of condensation for A is proportional to the corresponding vapor pressure of A. So what we essentially have is, now we have, instead of treating this expression, instead of having an expression for the unary system, we now have an expression for the binary system, because we have included the role, or we have explicitly mentioned the number of A atoms present in the binary system. Now, one difficulty or one complexity in considering the number of A atom, or introducing directly the number of A atoms, is that it introduces, or it restricts, we develop the particular way, or we apply this particular formulation. It restricts the applicability of this particular formulation, because every time when there is a change in the number of components, even when there is a minuscule change in the number of atoms of A, corresponding change in the number of atoms needs to be included here. And on top of it, every time we need to measure the number of, or every time we need to have an estimate of the number of atoms that are present, A atoms that are present in T. So there are certain complexity in explicitly introducing the number of atoms in this formulation here. So therefore, an alternate way of representing the concentration of A, or the number of A atoms, is often considered. So the reason we have this expression is because the rate of condensation depends on, the rate of condensation of A depends on the number of atoms of A present in the system. So the rate of condensation of A depends exclusively on or it depends on the number of A atoms present. So we have to appropriately estimate the rate of condensation. So therefore a prefactor of that indicates the number of atom is included here. Now there are numerous ways of including, or there are several ways of including the amount of A present in the solution. So when we say the number of atoms, what we mean is that the amount of A present in the AB solution, which is nothing but the concentration. Again, the reason we are spending some time in these and understanding the solution is because the terminologies are key here. So these terminologies should be with you while you are considering the alloys and the solid solution. So whatever terminologies that we are learning here should help you understand, or you should be able to relate it to the solid solution, which we will be considering in the next lecture. So that's the reason why we are spending some time in these discussions. Now we have a parameter that is dependent on the number of atoms, and this number of atoms, when you have combination of atoms, is nothing but the amount of atom or amount of a particular component that is present in this binary system. So amount of A present in AB solution, and this is nothing but the concentration. Now one rather a less complex way of representing the concentration is by considering the amount of A that is present in a given phase when compared to all the amount, when compared to the total number of atoms present in that phase. So you have Na representing the number of atoms that is present in a given phase when compared to the total number of atoms that is present in a given phase. So you have a system, a vapor phase of the system, and you have some A atoms and some B atoms, and now we are attempting to represent the amount of A atoms. We are attempting to represent the concentration of A atoms using a new expression, which is nothing but the ratio of A atoms, that is the B or the blue dot alone, to that of the total number of atoms that is present, both blue and red dots. So this is this expression here. This is referred to as the mole fraction. It is referred to as mole fraction because often instead of the number of atoms, people equate the number of atoms or relate the number of atoms to a specific constant and express it as the number of moles. And since we are taking the ratio here, all those things get cancelled out. It is as equivalent as comparing the ratio between the number of a given atom to that of the total number of atoms. So what we have is mole fraction. Now one good thing about, couple of good things about the mole fraction. One is it is unitless. Even when we are treating number of moles, there is a unit associated with it, but mole fraction, it is unitless. Often when you are formulating an expression, the unitless terms are like gift. So therefore we exploit that advantage of the mole fraction and often try to represent the concentration in mole fraction. The one other thing is that, so this is the expression for mole fraction of A. When you consider the expression for the mole fraction of B, it will be the number of atoms of B, that is with respect to the ratio of the number of atoms of B, and the total number of atoms, that is Na and Nb. So this will be the expression for the mole fraction of the component B in solution AB. Now the summation of the mole fraction XA and AB. So summation of the mole fraction of A and the summation of the and the mole fraction of B is always equal to 1. So therefore, when the mole fraction of A is known, it is possible for us to identify or to estimate the mole fraction of B. So therefore, in a binary system, we just have one independent variable. So even though the binary system comprises of two different components, if we know the concentration of A that is expressed in mole fraction, of course this is for a closed system, again for a closed system, if we know the mole fraction of one component, you will be able to calculate the mole fraction of the others. So the number of variables is reduced. We are able to reduce the number of variables using the mole fraction here. Of course we can do it with the number of atoms, but again for that we need to know the total number of atoms that are present and the total number of the number of A atoms or B atoms that are present, which is not that straightforward to estimate. So what essentially we are now doing is we are replacing the number of atoms which influences the rate of condensation. So number of atoms that is present in the vapor phase that influences the rate of condensation, this number of atoms which which ideally it indicates the concentration of A, we are replacing it with mole fraction. And the expression, then the trend, the relation, it remains the same, meaning we are now talking about the rate of the condensation of A, and this rate of condensation of A is now being restricted by the amount of A that is present. In the ideal case here, it was only A that is present, so therefore the mole fraction of A is equal to 1 because all the atoms that were present were of A component and the total number of components were also, the total number of atoms were also equivalent, so the total mole fraction in case of the unary solution is 1. However, here we have two distinct components, so none of these components have the mole fraction of 1, so therefore the rate of condensation, which is dependent on the number of atoms of A, should be appropriately reduced, so therefore a prefactor of this mole fraction of A is introduced. Then this is proportional to that of the vapor pressure of A, and now it is possible for us to introduce a proportionality constant Ka, and this, what we have just done is we have introduced this proportionality constant here. Now when we consider the rate of condensation of A, what we have is we have the proportionality constant and we are rather normalizing or dividing the vapor pressure of A with respect to the concentration, or rather concentration of A. So we have made some changes to this initial relation and we have arrived at this expression here. Now at the equilibrium, what we have is, we saw that at equilibrium the condensation of A is equivalent to that of its saturated vapor pressure. So therefore when the stability is established, when the equilibrium is established, it is established only when the saturated vapor pressure is attained. So we saw that conceptually the saturated vapor pressure ensures that the stability or the equilibrium is established. So therefore when we assume that in the solution in AB an equilibrium stability is established, then it is possible for us to equate this expression 1 and this expression 2 here. So what we have is, we have a solution, a binary solution that is reaching a stability, and we have a unary solution that is reaching a stability. The stability means the stability is governed by the saturated vapor pressure, and this saturated vapor pressure is a factor that is dependent on the component, and since we have the A component in both unary and B and it is already been normalized by the phase fraction here, it is possible for us to equate 1 and 2. So the principle, the conceptual understanding behind 1 and 2 is the same. We have saturation, we have an evaporation, we have a equilibrium that is established, and this equilibrium can only be established when the saturated vapor pressure is achieved. And now in one case we have achieved saturated vapor pressure because it is purely A. In this case we have achieved it, or the equilibrium is achieved despite being a solution, and it is normalized with respect to the component or the portion or the concentration of A. So therefore it becomes possible for us to equate the relation, the expression 1 and 2. When we do that, what we end up having is the saturated vapor pressure is equal to the ratio of the vapor pressure of the component A in the solution and its corresponding concentration expressed in mole fraction. So this can also be written as the vapor pressure of A in dynamic equilibrium is equal to the product of the concentration of A and its saturated vapor pressure. So this is a material constant and this is the variable, because this is a material constant because this is only dependent on the nature of A. So when you have a solution of A, this is the only factor, or this is dependent on A. So with this we will wind this lecture up, and what this relation means we will see in the next lecture. Goodbye.